it's with great pleasure that once again we have Aruna Misawagi as our speaker. She's going to speak on vegetarianism. And I'd like to introduce you to her. Miss Aruna Misawagi was born and brought up in Bangalore, India. Hers is a close-knit family of 4 with her parents and her elder brother. She has an undergraduate degree in industrial engineering from RV College of Engineering in Bangalore, India. She came to the United States in July of 2006 to pursue her higher studies. She graduated from West Virginia University in December 2008 with a master's degree in industrial engineering. She works as an industrial engineer for a global electronics company called TE Connectivity in Winston-Salem. She's an active member of Toastmasters International since September of 2012. She's currently serving as the Vice President of Public Relations at the Triad Toastmasters in Greensboro. She is an Impact Council member at the United Way of Greater Greensboro. She is a writer, a speaker. She is a spiritual seeker and a discipline of the Divine Grace of A.C.
Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada.
Thank you. Founder of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON. She loves to read, is a health enthusiast, and aspiring entrepreneur. To know more about her, you can watch her video, Indian Roots and American Wings, available on YouTube. And I encourage you to do that. So I'd like to introduce to you Aruna.
Thank you, Dave. Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to be back here at Universalist Bridge Church. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I hope you remember me from back in September when I was here to talk about my spiritual beliefs and practices. Well, I'm here today to talk about an extremely important and very relevant topic, which is vegetarianism. Someone rightly said, "Tell me what you eat and I will tell you who you are." That is such a true statement because food is such an integral part of our lives. Food affects so many things, our physical health, mental clarity, longevity, and so much more. Now, before I go any further, what I would like to do is just get a feel for the dietary preferences of all of you. So let's have a show of hands. How many of you are vegetarians? I am. Okay, so Peggy is a vegetarian. How many of you would like to become vegetarians? Tracy? Kind of, okay. Jimmy, did you raise your hand?
No.
Okay.
I was in the past.
Okay.
But,
So you switched back to a non-vegetarian diet?
yeah.
Okay. So looks like I'm talking to the right audience. And plus I'm here in the midst of industrial farming Goldsboro. Dave was just telling me, how many people, what's the population of
Probably
Goldsboro?
about 35,000 people in the county, Wayne County, and
Okay.
probably about 3.5 million hogs.
See, 35,000 people is the population of this place, and there is 3.7 million hogs and many more turkeys. That's what
Yeah.
you said. So looks like this is the ideal situation for me to be talking about vegetarianism. Well, talking about food, let me tell you what's on the menu for today's talk. So I would be covering 3 main things. Number 1, why embrace vegetarianism? What are some of the compelling reasons why one should turn to a vegetarian diet? Number 2, burst some myths and misconceptions that is surrounding vegetarianism. And number 3, going beyond vegetarianism. Now you might be wondering, what is beyond vegetarianism? Well, we'll talk about it when we get to that part. Many people, for so many different reasons, are turning to a plant-based diet. Keeping the time in mind, I will focus on 4 major reasons why one should adopt a vegetarian diet. Number 1, health. Number 2, economics and environment. Number 3, ethics and religion. And number 4 is karmic consequences. I'll dive a little bit deeper into each one of these. So first we'll talk about health. When I talk about health, there are 2 important areas that need to be covered under this. One is we need to talk about human anatomy, and 2, let's talk about the physical effects of meat consumption. Now under human anatomy, a basic question that needs to be answered is the human body better suited for a plant-based diet or an animal-based diet? Now let's make some comparisons of human body with that of a herbivore and a carnivore. I'm sure you know herbivores are animals that feed on plants, and carnivores are animals like tiger, lions, they feed on flesh. So eating starts with hands and mouth. Let's start there. If you observe the front teeth, our front teeth is not sharp. But if you see that of a carnivore, they have sharp front teeth. And they have the front teeth sharp to be able to hold the prey and tear the flesh. Our teeth is not sharp like that of herbivores. And within the mouth, we have molars, these big teeth that we have behind in the backside. We have molars to be able to chew the food nicely, chew the vegetable matter. But if you compare that to carnivores, they don't have molars, most of them, because they don't chew their food. They just swallow it, swallow the flesh. So those are a couple of basic differences in the mouth. We don't have the front sharp teeth, and we have molars, whereas carnivores don't. And even hands, if you compare, we don't have sharp claws, but carnivores do, again to be able to kill the prey, to tear the flesh. We don't. Our hands are more adept for harvesting fruits and vegetables rather than killing a prey. And now let's talk about the stomach. Once the meat is within the stomach, to be able to digest meat, the digestive juices should be very strong in hydrochloric acid, and that is what is the case with carnivores. But with humans, tests have shown that the hydrochloric acid inside our stomach is about 1/20th the strength of the acid found in that of carnivores. And within the stomach, let's talk about another crucial difference of the intestinal tract, where the food gets further digested and the nutrients are passed into the blood. If you take a carnivore, their intestinal tract is only about 3 times the length of their body. And that is ideal for a meat-based diet, because you don't want this flesh to be within your body for a long time, because it gets putrefied. And the more it gets putrefied, it releases these toxic wastes into the blood. For the carnivores, great. Their intestinal tract is only 3 times the length, it quickly gets digested and is eliminated out of the body. But how about us? Our intestinal tract is 12 times the length of our body. So the flesh stays in our intestinal tracts for 4 times longer. And all the while that it stays here, it is releasing these toxic wastes that go into the blood. And because our blood is getting so toxicated, now the blood comes to another vital organ, which is the kidney, and the kidney's function is to be able to remove those toxic waste. Now because the blood is overloaded with these toxins, now the kidney has to work 3 times as harder to be able to remove those toxins. So those are just a few anatomical differences between a carnivore and a herbivore, and clearly there is no second thought. Human body, the anatomy falls more in line with a herbivore and not a carnivore. Say in spite of that, if you still consume meat, what are the physical effects? Heart disease is found to be the #1 killer. In fact, in the United States, they say about half of the deaths are caused due to some kind of a heart-related problem. Now, as we all know, meat is high in fat content. Our body is not equipped to deal with digesting this excessive fat and cholesterol. All the excess fat gets stored as fat deposits inside the inner walls of the arteries. And arteries are the ones that get the blood flow to the heart, and because the arteries get narrower and constricted due to these fat deposits, the chances of getting heart attacks, strokes, and blood clots are tremendously increased. The American Heart Association, the American National Medical Association, all these associations have time and again told that they have said that 90 to 97% of these heart diseases can be prevented following a basic plant-based diet. And the #2 killer is cancer. As I already said, The intestinal tract is 12 times longer, 12 times the length of our body, so the food stays there longer. What makes it even worse is that meat is high in fat, low in fiber. And because it is low in fiber, the food stays there for even longer and the transit time gets much slower. So all this, because it stays there for so long, it causes a lot of damage which leads to colon cancer and rectal cancer. And there are a whole host of chemicals, tranquilizers, growth hormones, antibiotics, preservatives, and about 2,700 different drugs, FDA approved drugs that are used by animal industry in maintaining the slaughterhouses and preserving the meat and all that. So obviously these chemicals, when we consume meat for such a long periods of time, get into the person of the body who is consuming this meat for many years. So those are just some of the physical effects of consuming meat for lengthier periods of time. Now let's look at another major reason, economics and environment. I'm sure some of you must have heard people voice their concern about the problem of world hunger. And they say overpopulation is the cause for this world hunger problem. But this is a big illusion. Let me throw some facts and figures at you. Once you hear that, you yourself will understand why I'm calling this a big illusion. Let's say, for example, we take 16 kilograms of grains. Any kind of grains, wheat, rice, millet, whatever. If you take 16 kilograms of grains and just feed it directly to people, you can feed about 20 people. But if you take the same 16 kilograms of grains and feed it to, say, a cattle, a cow, it'll get converted into 1 kilogram of beef. And that 1 kilogram of beef can feed just one person. So depending on how you use that 16 kilograms of grains to feed, you can either feed 20 people or you can feed just one person. Now keep that in mind. We'll come back to that in just a minute. The first time when I came to Universalist Church, I was driving along this highway, and given the fact that I live in this concrete jungle where all I see is the residential buildings and industrial buildings, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that on both sides of the road, acres and acres of lands are cultivated for some kind of crops. So when I got here, I was talking to Dave and I said, Dave, it's so nice that I saw all these land being cultivated. And then he told me, well, Aruna, that is to feed the hogs, not people. It didn't take very long for my excitement to turn to disappointment. Sadly, that is not the story just here on the highway. That seems to be the story for United States and all across the world. About half of the land that is suitable for cultivating in America is used to feed livestock, cattle, pigs, lamb, turkey, and not people. Now compare this to what I just said. 16 kilograms of grains, if you feed people directly, you can feed 20. If you feed it to a livestock, then you feed the person, you can just feed one person. So they are not utilizing the resources properly. In fact, a recent study showed if the majority of the agriculture land on earth is used to cultivate vegetarian crops that can be used to feed people, we can easily feed more than 20 billion people. What is the current population of the world as of today? 7.3 billion. So not only can you feed the 7.3 existing population, you can feed thrice more than 20 billion. So clearly, overpopulation is not the problem. Scarcity is man-made. The true problem is not utilizing the agriculture land properly and the unintelligent distribution of food products. And to add to this, the animal production process is so costly and so wasteful that the government gives them subsidies, grants, and favorable loans to help them sustain. And where does government get all this money from? It's the tax money that you and I and millions of others are paying, which is going straight down the drain. So not only does it not make economic sense, this slaughterhouses, maintaining slaughterhouses is also causing major environmental damage, especially for water, which is a precious and limited resource. Contamination and depletion are the two major problems created directly by slaughterhouses. In fact, my brother Anil, who knew that I was going to talk here today on vegetarianism, just few days back, this past week, he sent me an article, and it was a very informative article because it's very recent, from April 7th. That article was shedding light and saying that animal agriculture is the biggest culprit for the water shortage faced by California. People took to the streets with placards saying that they need to ban this and stop maintaining animal agriculture and slaughterhouses. And they had some interesting statistics there. It takes about 2,500 gallons of water to get 1 pound of beef. On the contrary, it only takes 100 gallons of water to get a pound of wheat. So what a wasteful use of water. And every day, cow, it consumes about 23 gallons of water, and mostly these cows are reared to be slaughtered, so to get the meat. So the cow is consuming every day 23 gallons of water, and humans are consuming less than 1 gallon of water a day. So it just doesn't make absolutely no sense to maintain these unnecessary slaughterhouses. It's such a wasteful thing. So that's about economic and environment. Let's move on to the third one, which is ethics and religion. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Said who? Lord Jesus Christ, Luke chapter 6, verse 31. When he said do unto others, that others doesn't just include my next door neighbor, it doesn't just include my fellow human beings, that others includes God's creation entire, animals, beasts, plant, aquatics, everything. So while we don't want to be killed, we continue to kill these animals just merely to satisfy our taste buds. Billions of animals and birds are killed every single year for food. While what we see as we walk down the supermarket is neatly packaged, nicely wrapped piece of meat placed in the shelf of the supermarket, what we don't see is the bloody massive killing that happens behind the scenes in the slaughterhouses, which is like visions of hell. And Dave was also actually describing it to me. Screaming animals are stunned with hammer blows, electric shocks, and concussion guns. And then they are hoisted into the air with their feet up. And in many cases, they are moved through these death factories on the mechanized conveyor system. And often, while they are still alive, their throats are sliced and the flesh is teared apart. And no wonder Paul McCartney, who was a member of the famous music group Beatles, he said, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would be a vegetarian. Many great people over the centuries, Pythagoras, Leonardo da Vinci, Benjamin Franklin, Mohandas Gandhi, famous poet Shelley, George Bernard Shaw, all these people and so many more have practiced and propagated vegetarianism. In fact, George Bernard Shaw, somebody asked him, George, how come you look so young? So George retorted and said, I don't. He said, I look my age, it is others who look older than their age. What else can you expect from people who gorge on corpses? That was his answer. Now, even talking about religion, avoidance of meat is something that is practiced across all religious faiths. I do notice that the major stumbling block for Christians is that many people say that, well, even Jesus Christ ate meat, and there are references to meat eating in the Bible. Well, I am no authority to talk about Bible because I have not read it cover to cover, but I do know that many people who have read it and studied it debate this topic, and they say in the original Greek version of the Bible, there is no reference to Christ eating the meat, and there is no references to meat eating. When they mistranslated into English, the words that generally mean in Greek, that means just food and eating in general, were translated as meat and flesh. So there is a lot of debate on that. Like I said, I am nobody to comment on that. But even otherwise, one of the 10 commandments laid out by Lord Jesus Christ, thou shalt not kill. And again, people misinterpret it and say, well, that applies only for human beings, not for animals. Well, if it applied only for human beings, Lord Jesus Christ would have said, thou shalt not murder. But he said, thou shalt not kill, which is a general term and it applies for everybody. And then even in Genesis chapter 1 verse 29, I think, it's clearly laid out. The prescribed food for human beings is vegetarian food, not meat. And many prophets who come later in the Bible, they also condemn meat eating, like Isaiah. And even there is a story of Daniel, who was, while he was imprisoned in Babylon, he refused to eat meat that was offered by jailers, and instead he chose to eat a simple vegetarian diet. So those are some of the, and actually the largest concentration of vegetarians in the world is in India, which is the land of both Hinduism and Buddhism. So in Buddhism, Lord Buddha, when he appeared, it was at the time where there was rampant animal killing. And one of his primary teachings that he preached across everywhere was non-violence. And so is Hinduism. The Vedic scriptures in Hinduism also very strongly stress on non-violence as the ethical foundation of vegetarianism. Now finally we'll talk about the fourth major reason to embrace vegetarianism, if I haven't convinced you already. Fourth is the karmic consequences. Now when I say karma, the word karma means action. There is good action, there is bad action, there is inaction. So if we do good, what we get is good result. If we do bad, what we get is bad result. I think some of you are aware of this physical law, Newton's third law, that says every action has equal and opposite reaction. As you sow, so shall you reap. So the law of karma follows the similar way, works the similar way. If you sow a neem seed, what you reap is a neem plant, which is bitter in nature. If you sow a mango seed, what you reap is a mango tree, which is sweet in nature. It is just illogical to plant a neem seed and expect to reap a mango tree. That is just not going to happen. Same with our actions and thoughts and words. If we sow love, we reap love. If we sow hatred, we reap hatred. So we cannot continue to inflict pain and suffering by killing all these animals in a massive, inhumane way, and in return not expect for us to go through the pain and suffering. In fact, we are already seeing it. The way we are incurring pain and suffering is through wars, terrorism, abortions, murders, natural calamities, hurricanes, tsunami, you name it, earthquakes. So what goes around comes around. So we better be careful of what we do, what we say, and what we think. And the best way to avoid this bad karmic consequence is to forego a meat-based diet and instead embrace a plant-based diet. So those are some of the reasons why one should adopt vegetarian diet. Now let's talk about a few myths and some common questions that get asked every time we talk about vegetarianism. This one question that I get asked so many times that I'm so tired of answering it. I hope to put it to rest once and for all by explaining it here in this talk. As soon as I tell somebody I'm a vegetarian, 9 out of 10 times I bet my money on it. They'll ask me, oh, how nice, but what about protein? Every single time, almost all the time. And I retort, well, what about the elephant, the rhinoceros, the bull? Because all these animals that I just mentioned are vegetarians, are herbivores. So if an elephant is getting its protein from a plant-based diet, I'm sure you all agree with me, I don't think I have any reason to worry about my protein. So let's talk a little bit about this protein thing so people understand it better. Protein, when digested in our body, gets broken down into its constituent amino acids. Our body uses these amino acids for growth and tissue replacement. There are totally 22 amino acids, and 14 out of those 22 amino acids are synthesized by our body itself. You don't have to feed it through your food. Your body synthesizes it on its own. And of the 8 amino acids that you have to feed, it's proven that it exists in abundance in non-flesh foods, in dairy, in beans, in grains, in nuts. In fact, they have proven by doing some tests that 1 ounce of lentil or 1 ounce of peanut or cheese has more protein than 1 ounce of ham or steak. In fact, the problem is many Americans, they consume more protein than they actually need. And your body cannot consume the excess protein more than what it needs. It in fact converts that excess protein into nitrogenous waste and then burdens the kidney because the kidney has to now eliminate all that waste. So carbohydrate is the primary source of energy for our body, not protein. Protein is actually the last resort of energy production for our body. So we don't have to really, as long as we eat a balanced, wholesome vegetarian diet, vegetarians don't have to worry about getting enough protein. Well, one other question, in fact somebody that I know asked me in the past is, he said, well, I'm not killing the animal myself, I'm just buying it from the store with my hard-earned money. So he said, I am not guilty of animal killing. That argument does not hold. Everybody that conspires in the murder is held responsible and will be awarded punishment. So in fact, in Manu Samhita, which is a book on ethical and moral codes, it states 6 parties are held guilty. The person who gives the permission for killing, the person who actually kills, the person who helps with killing, the person who purchases the meat, the person who cooks the meat, and the person who eats the meat. All 6 parties are held guilty, and which kind of makes logical sense, because even in the court of law, if somebody says, I did not kill that guy, I hired an assassin to kill him for me, will that hold? No. He is equally guilty. In fact, he is more guilty for hiring the assassin service. So that's the answer to that question. And one other question people usually ask is, well, don't plants have life too? So although you are a vegetarian, you are killing plants too. So aren't you incurring sin? That's absolutely right. Plants do have life, and that is also sinful. But I would like to mention 2 things here. Vegetarian foods like milk products, grains, beans, nuts, fruits, vegetables, they do not require any killing at all. You're just taking the byproduct. And 2, even in cases where you have to kill the plant, the pain that is inflicted is much less than what is inflicted in, say, killing an animal. And the reason for that is the nervous system of the plant is not as developed as it is in an animal. But it is true that even by killing a plant, we should not kill anything unnecessarily. And even when you do kill a plant, you do incur some karmic reaction. And for that, I will address that in my next section, how you can overcome that sin of even killing a plant. But it is stated that in this food pyramid, food chain, one living being is a food to the another. But the prescribed food for us is plants and fruits and vegetables and grains and all that. So as long as you're eating the prescribed food and you do it the right way, which I'll talk about in my next section, you don't incur sin, you can overcome it. So the third section will talk about beyond vegetarianism. Beyond the concerns of health, ethics, economics, environment, religion, and even karma, vegetarianism has this higher spiritual dimension to it that helps us develop the love and appreciation for God. It is very easy walking down the supermarket. Many people tend to forget a basic fact that it is not man but God who makes the food. It's actually a very mystical process how the food grows. You take this tiny little seed, you put it in the ground, the next thing you watch it grow, it's a beautiful experience, it sprouts and then it's grown. A tiny little tomato seed has grown into a tomato plant which gives you dozens of tasty tomatoes, and each of this tomato has so many seeds, and each of that seed has the potential to grow another tomato plant. It's just mind-blowing. Until today, no team of scientists has invented anything as amazing as this simple green creation of God. Don't we have this prayer in Christianity where we say, God, give us today our daily bread? What to speak of bread? Not just bread. God is giving us, along with bread, so many other varieties of foods. Isn't it basic etiquette to offer our gratitude back to God? And how do we do it? Well, the food that we cook has to be cooked with the intention as a way of showing your love and gratitude to God. Even in ordinary dealings, cooking is not just about the ingredients, it is the consciousness with which it is cooked. Perhaps that is why many people, when you ask them who their favorite cook is, they say their mother. Because it's not just the ingredients, it's the love and affection, that unconditional love with which she's cooking for her family, husband and children and others. So how can we transform that? We can use that same consciousness, but cook with the consciousness with love and devotion and gratitude as a way of saying, thank you, Lord, you have given me all this. I'm cooking this for you. And then you offer the food to God before you consume it. In Bhagavad Gita, I'm sure some of you are aware, talked a little bit about Bhagavad Gita in my last talk. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 27, Krishna, God, says, whatever, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, all the austerities that you perform, do it as an offering to me. So of all the things he is saying, all that you eat, do it as an offering unto me. And what should we eat? He is prescribing that in the very previous verse, chapter 9, verse 26. He is saying, if one offers me with love and with devotion a leaf, a fruit, a flower, or water, I will accept it. So he is clearly prescribing pure vegetarian items. He is not saying offer me meat. He is not saying offer me wine or cigarettes. He is saying offer me leaf, fruit, flower or water. It's a completely pure vegetarian items. So you cook the food, the prescribed food, which is a vegetarian diet, and then before you consume it, you offer it to God. Now what happens when you offer the food to God? Because of the immense transcendental energy that Krishna has, he transforms something that is material into spiritual. What was a lump of material substance is now spiritual food called prasadam in Sanskrit, which actually means the mercy of the Lord. Just like if you take an iron rod and put it in the fire, before long, the iron rod will become red hot and pretty much acquire all these essential qualities of the fire. So similarly, when you offer the food to God and God accepts it, he has spiritualized the food. And when you consume that spiritual food, the blessing of the Lord, your consciousness is elevated, it purifies you, you develop a higher taste. So eating only food that is offered to Krishna is the ultimate perfection of a vegetarian diet. Just being a vegetarian by itself is not the greatest accomplishment. Even a monkey is a vegetarian, so what is so great about that? Okay? So the real purpose of human life is to reawaken this lost connection, the spiritual loving connection that we have with our Creator. And by eating spiritual food, by way of expressing our gratitude, that process of eating, an everyday mundane act, can become an enlightening experience and take us closer to that goal and help us achieve that goal. So that is how you go beyond vegetarianism. So in summary, why embrace vegetarianism? Well, one has to embrace vegetarianism because human body is better suited for a plant-based diet, because it is healthier, because it makes more economic sense, because it's environmentally friendly, because it's ethical, because it's religious, and because that's the way you overcome your bad karmic consequences. It's not sinful. And don't you worry about your protein and other nutrients. If you eat a wholesome, balanced vegetarian diet, you will get all the protein you need, all the nutrients your body will ever need. You don't have to worry about it. And not only that, you get some extra bonuses too. It is much easier to maintain your weight when you follow a plant-based diet. You feel fantastic, you look great. But most importantly, remember, Don't just stop at being a vegetarian. Take it a step further. Go beyond vegetarianism. Eat only food that is offered to God with love and devotion. By doing so, not only will you nourish your body, but you will also enrich your spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
I think we'll, not do the last hymn. I'm just going to give a benediction, and then we're going to open up for questions and answers.